You have 10,000 readers who come back every time for your book. Every time you put a book out, you can have 10,000 readers show up and buy that book, whether it's in the first day or the first week or the first month. You will have enough of a reader base to run a business. And so that is always stuck in my head, is that I don't need to have 100,000 people. I don't need to have 2 million people. I would love that many, don't get me wrong, but I only need to have 10,000 people reading my books to have this as a career.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.
Hello, bosses. Welcome to Author Like a Boss. We are here today with Shannon Mayer. Shannon started writing when she realized she didn't want to grow up not believing in magic or not believing in creatures everyone else said didn't exist. Today, she is the USA Today bestselling author of the Riley Adamson novels, the Elemental series, the Phoenix series, and many more. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be interviewing today. Shannon, because one, I also don't like to believe that dragons don't exist. Dragons are I'm like, they're there. Nobody can prove they're not there. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me on, Ella. I'm always excited to have a chat with other authors about authoring stuff.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your author journey, and go ahead and include all the way up until now and what you're working on currently?
Sure. So I started writing like when I was a kid, as a lot of authors do, but was told by the grown-ups that, it's not a real job. Writing is not a real job. You need to have a real job. And so I just kind of put it on the back burner and I went to school. I became a farrier. So I was shoeing horses for almost 13 years. It was a great job. I love horses. As you can see by one of my more recent cover art, horses play a big part in that new series. But I knew that it was a job that was just too physically demanding if I wanted to have kids. Climbing under horses when you're 9 months pregnant is not generally a good idea. And so I started looking at like other things that I love to do. And I just kept coming back to the writing. Like I love the writing. And my husband encouraged me. He said, if, what doesn't matter? It'll cost you like some paper and some pens and you've already got a little laptop. Like, why not try? He's like, the time's going to pass regardless of what you do. So if you try and you succeed, maybe you can make a few $100s a month and maybe over time you could like replace your income as a farrier with your income as a writer. And I thought, okay, let's try it. So I was 25 when I started writing with the idea that I wanted to make it a career. And I'll be 39 in a couple of months. And I've been writing now full time for 5 years. So it was a really not a quick thing. I know probably some people look at my path and think maybe it was a quick journey, but it really wasn't. It was a long time. It's been 15 years of making this my goal. And a little boy now, he'll be 4 years old in May. And so I'm, in my mind, I'm living the dream. I'm a mom, I'm a writer. I get to play with dragons and unicorns and monsters and weapons in my books. And then I get to go home and, hang out with my kid and do the things that I love there too. So I've been very blessed to have the career that I have had so far, and I don't take it for granted. I have great readers. I have great supportive readers. They've kind of hung out with me right from the beginning in many cases, right from my first trilogy, which was the Nevermore trilogy, right up to now, which is my Desert Curse series, Witch's Reign is the first book, and Dragon's Ground is coming out in a few short days. So I've been having a good time. It's been a great time. Lots of ups and downs, but I don't regret any of it. I regret nothing.
That's so awesome. So there's a couple of things that I want to delve into a little bit deeper. So Sure. You said you started 14 years ago, but only in the last 5 years has it been full time. Were you doing part-time something else, not farriering?
No, I was, I was a horseshoer. I was a farrier for that probably 13, 14 years. From the time I was like 21 till 5 years ago, and my math is bad, so don't count on me for that. But so that was what I was doing full time. That was my career. And my goal when I first started writing, my goal was to become traditionally published. I went to conferences. I met agents. I met editors. I did meet an agent that liked my work and wanted to represent me. So that was a big milestone for me at the time. I thought, wow, this is it. I've made it. And then that agent actually just kind of basically put me on the back burner for 2 years, which was unfortunate for her because in that time, the indie world was starting to bloom and flourish. And I knew a friend that was making, decent money writing books. And I thought, well, shit, if she can do that, writing, books that, I'm a writer. I should be able to do this too. So I asked my agent, I said, I'm thinking about doing this indie thing, giving it a go because I didn't really know what was expected of me at that point. And she said, oh yeah, go for it. She said, maybe it'll help, basically build a following so that we easier to sell to the publishers basically. But the problem was by the time she kind of showed back up in my life, I was starting to make a whopping $200-300 a month. And, I was pretty excited because I could see the potential for it. So basically September 2011, I started self-publishing. I had done the process, hired a cover artist and editors and it was not on par with what I do now in terms of my process, but it was the best I could do at the time. And it was I think that made a difference in terms of reaching people and starting to cultivate that reader base. And so it was about 18 months after that. It was 2012. Yes, it was 2012. I have to think about this. No, it was 2013 that I quit. Must be because it's 2018 now. You see what I mean about
5 years?
Math?
Yes.
Terrible. 5 years. So 2013, it was May 1st, 2013 that I walked away from my day job and totally embraced this lifestyle of writing every day, which was it was so crazy to me because my previous job had been so physically demanding to go to something that was just like all brain. And I was like, this is wild, man. I can't even believe I get to do this for a living or a job. And I every day, I don't take it for granted. I don't assume it's always going to be there. So I'm always grateful that I have readers and that I have book ideas that won't shut up inside my head.
Yeah. I am grateful as well, you guys. I happen to be a Shannon Mayer fan before she even agreed to be on this podcast. So I was like, yay! Shannon Mayer, because I love paranormal books.
You're not alone.
I know. I know. And I've loved them for a long time and I still don't get, they haven't gotten old for me. It's a weird thing. But I'm really grateful that they haven't gotten old for a lot of people. So while, so a lot of people feel like getting the agent is making it just like, that's like the, done, ready to go. What has been the benefits, the pros for you for indie versus traditional?
Well, I think there's a number of things. A big part of it is going to depend on your personality as an author. I can say with fairly good confidence that I am a control freak when it comes to my stuff, when it comes to my business, because I've learned the hard way in a lot of places and a lot of times, I've made mistakes. And so it's very hard for me to hand over control, say, as an example, for cover art. I've learned the hard way who does good cover art, who doesn't, what works, what doesn't. Some things are, genre specific. And so it's very hard for me to think about handing over the control of that to, say, a publisher, as I did with my Venom and Vanilla series, because they went to Amazon's branch, which is 47 North. That's their fantasy branch of publishing. And so it was really difficult for me. And I realized that about myself. So one of the benefits of being indie is you get to say what your cover looks like. You get to decide on your your plot, even, because to some degree in a traditional world you have to deal with editors that rule the roost at the editing houses. So that's, for being an indie, it's all on you. So in my mind, with being an indie, whether you fail or you succeed is on your shoulders. You can't blame anyone else. And I personally love that. I wouldn't want it any other way. I don't want to be able to say, oh my God, you guys totally screwed me over because you did a shitty cover, or you did poor editing, or you changed the book in a way that I knew wasn't going to work, but because you're the, queen bee editor, I had to bow to you, which happens a lot in the traditional world. Now, the downsides, of course, is that, getting your books into the, everyday bookstore market is nearly impossible as an indie. It's not impossible, but close. Mm-hmm. And there are benefits to having a publishing house behind you in the idea that they could promote you more. They could promote you in different ways that we feasibly don't have as indies. What I've seen, though, with my own friends and with other indies that I've talked to who've done the hybrid thing, is that even when you're a big seller, the publishing house has a lot of authors that they're dealing with. And if you aren't automatically a big seller, they're not necessarily going to put their weight behind you. That being said, I think there are some publishing houses out there that do a decent job and who I would personally be willing to work with. But it would have to be the right timing, the right market. I have an agent now. He's amazing. And I'm looking forward to potentially going in that route because it's a business and you've got to just keep trying different things, see what's going to work as the industry is in its ebb and flow. You want to never just say, I'm only going to be indie or I'm only going to be traditional. I think you really have to keep your options open as a business person to realize that maybe this worked yesterday, but it's not going to work today. So I need to try something else.
I'd like to dive into that a little bit, because I think a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out, don't realize that being a writer, when you start as a writer, you're writing, but as soon as you start selling your books, you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like you're a business person now. And so there's a couple things I want to touch on. And so let me ask them, and then let's remember, I don't want to forget. So I want to touch on the marketing that you do for indie versus traditional and what is expected. And then also talk a little bit about running your author business, like, and what kind of mindset and how did that transition happen? Like when you started, were you like, oh yeah, this is my author business? Or, how did you get to that place? So those two things.
Well, let's start with the marketing first then.
Okay.
I think there's a misconception with a lot of more of the new authors, I would say, than the older authors. The authors that have been around for a while, they'll be nodding as I say this. There's no difference in what you do for marketing, whether you are traditional or indie. Like you, as an indie author, you will be in charge of, running advertisements on Facebook, or potentially doing blog tours, or maybe getting out there to do some signings. And
or on a podcast.
Right, exactly. And so there's this idea that as, I'm published with a traditional house, they're going to set all these things up for me, and there's going to be all these amazing things. And I hope that profanity is okay on your show, Ella, because I'm going to say they're fucking out of their minds. Like there is no big hype now that there used to be with a traditional house. In my experience, like I say, is coming from watching other authors go through this. The blog world was huge, right? Back in like 2011, 2012, even a little into 2013. A successful blog tour could make or break an indie author's career, right? Like it was a huge thing. And bloggers are still out there. Bloggers are still followed, but it's something that's faded in terms of
impact.
Thank you. I was trying to find that right word. And that's okay. I mean, it's what it is. And yet the traditional world still, they consider that like a big thing if they get you a blog tour, which is cool. but you might get 2 or 3 sales from that. Whereas if you go on a podcast, you might see an influx of 25 or 30 sales. Like, they're just really behind the times. And they expect, especially the indie authors who know what they're doing, they kind of expect the indie authors to do more of their own marketing anyways when they do the hybrid thing. So I think this idea that a traditional house is going to throw a lot of money and weight behind you as a new author, especially if you're like a brand new debut author, is a fallacy that is unfortunate, because the publishing houses, of course, have that clout that they could swing around if they wanted, but it's a business, and obviously they're looking at it from a business perspective, that if you're not going to sell well kind of on your own, they're not necessarily going to put a lot of money and time into you.
Yeah, I think I'm
probably not winning any friends here.
No, I'm very pro indie author, but it's not because like there's some cachet. I always wonder if I'm using that word right, but I feel like there's a word.
It sounds good. It's a fun word.
Yeah.
Use it.
Especially now that you have like cache in your internet browser. So I'm like, am I using this word right anymore? But there's like some, like, you can really be like, some pride and like, I'm traditionally published, but I don't know that you're getting any more sales or the benefits that people think they're getting when you do that route. Because you actually, if you look at the numbers in terms of how much money you get back in your royalties, indie publishing is significantly better.
Yeah.
And if you're putting the work in for your marketing and your writing anyways, plus you don't like to give up control. I found at one point or for many years, I was like, I really don't like other people telling me what to do, especially when I know I could do it better.
Yeah, and I think even it's not even a matter of, for me at least, it's not a matter of doing it better, because I'm sure there are marketing geniuses out there who could just blow me out of the water. But I've found what works for the reader base that likes my books, right? So what I do in terms of marketing may not work for someone who writes contemporary romance, because it may not be what their readers are expecting. Because it's, advertising and marketing is about meeting expectations. You're meeting the expectations of the readers that you're trying to get the attention of. And so what works for me isn't going to work for another person. When I see someone do really well in the thriller market, I watch what they're doing and I think, would that be applicable? Yes or no? Probably no, right? Like, it's just not what would work for my reader base, or, the kind of readers that would enjoy my books. So yeah, it's an interesting game, this industry, for sure.
Yeah. And I'm skipping the question and we'll come back to it later.
As long as you've got it written down, we're all good.
I've got my notes here. Author as business is what we'll come back to. But I want to know, what is it that works? So you write paranormal romance. How else do you define your genre? And then can you share what works for your reader base when you're marketing?
What works?
Yeah.
So I would actually put myself more into the urban fantasy market. And the reason I say that is that there's almost always a romantic element, but it's not the cornerstone of the story. So the cornerstone of my stories are plot driven. There's action. There's usually some form of threat to the world or to the people or to, the characters. And the romance is definitely part of it. But I would say paranormal romance is more about the romance being central and the paranormal being external to it. But anyway,
you guys ignore what I said and definitely listen to what Shannon said. I just happen to like only basically urban fantasy that has romance in it. I don't like it as well if it doesn't have romance in it. So that's just me projecting my favorite part of the books, but it's really urban fantasy.
I'm the same way. I like a nice slow burn romance where you don't necessarily see them. I love the love-hate relationships. That's just my personal favorite thing. But anyways, what works for your audience when you're marketing? So as an urban fantasy writer, what is it that have you found? And it doesn't have to be too specific, but some general, like, what have you found that kind of works for your audience? So these are the things I would say. So because this is applicable to, I think, any genre and any author. So it's not even just specific to urban fantasy, but I would say the first thing is to brand yourself. as an author. So I write urban fantasy, and I have discovered what things my readers, again, talking about expectations, my readers have certain expectations for me and my characters and my stories. And as long as I meet those expectations, I can market the books accordingly, and I will be able to have repeat customers. I remember years ago when I was first starting, and I mean like closer to 10 years ago, as opposed to when I went full time. I think it was, I want to say John Loomer. I could be having the name wrong, but basically he wrote a book about how he'd sold like 30,000 copies in a month or something or $30,000 in a month or something like that. This is how crappy my memory is. But I remember something very specific he said, and it made sense to me. He said, if you have 10,000 readers who come back every time for your book, every time you put a book out, you can have 10,000 readers show up and buy that book, whether it's in the first day or the first week or the first month. You will have enough of a reader base to run a business. And so that is always stuck in my head, is that I don't need to have 100,000 people. I don't need to have 2 million people. I would love that many, don't get me wrong, but I only need to have 10,000 people reading my books to have this as a career. And so, so with that in mind, I specifically look at what do my readers say? So if you're an author of urban fantasy or whatever you're an author of, go to your reviews and see what the commonalities are. What are your reviewers saying they love, and what are they saying they hate? Because those two things will tell you, they'll help you start to kind of identify your brand. So when you brand yourself, you become like people, I'm pretty sure most of my readers will say Shannon Mayer books have badass female characters. They have some sort of weapon, the coolest sidekicks, and like a book you can't put down. That's my brand, right? That's part of who I am. But I learned that by figuring out, yes, I love to write it, but I had a couple sideways ones where I took a softer character and I brought them along slowly. My Venom and Vanilla series is like that, where she starts out pretty weak and pretty vulnerable and not sure of herself. And it just divided my readers in half, just divided them. And it's funny because it's one of my favorite storylines because she had such great character arc. But my readers come to me for a certain thing. And so you as an author, whatever your genre is, you need to know what your brand is, because then you can market it accordingly. You can say, my brand is urban fantasy, and you can use those keywords, whatever your keywords are, whether it's Facebook ads, which I'll be honest, I didn't do a lot of that in the beginning. I've only just recently gotten after those because other things were not working as they have been. In the past, I used BookBub pretty consistently. I would say, look at your sales numbers in terms of being wide versus being in Kindle Unlimited, because, a lot of authors, they hate Amazon. Oh, Amazon's screwing us over. They're screwing us over. And I've said this in other podcasts. Amazon doesn't give a shit about you personally. They're looking at the business. So if they make a decision and they change the algorithms that affect our books, they're not doing it to hurt us. They're doing it because for some reason, they believe that's going to increase their bottom line. So don't look at Amazon like, oh, I would never go into KU because they're such assholes. Maybe you wouldn't, but quite frankly, I like to put food on the table. Like I will go where my readers are, and I will go and do what's best for my business. And I think authors need to look at that as opposed to making an emotional decision of, I don't want to do this because it bothers me. Yes, forget that. Just look at your numbers. I mean, my math is terrible in my head, but I do a lot of numbering of things on the paper, and each author needs to look at that personally. That's what I think is probably some of my best marketing advice, because you have to figure out where you're going to be and where you're going to go before you can even market it. Does that make sense? Like you got to know who you are. You can't just say, I'm going to market my contemporary romance. Well, there's a billion of them. So what makes yours special? What is your brand? Who are you? And in each genre, you can do that, whether it's thriller or fantasy or romance. You can figure that out, and then you can go forward and market. Yeah. Go forth and market. I think and it might take some time to figure out, like sometimes you just put yourself out there and then you ask and people give you the feedback and you're like, oh, that's my author brand. Right. Absolutely. I didn't figure it out right away. I would never say that. I would say that, one of my the piece of advice that I have given consistently over the last few years, because as I've done different podcasts and I've done some online boot camps and conferences for different authors, the biggest thing I see is, authors are really afraid to get those bad reviews, the first 1 star, the first 2 star. And I get it. Like, I mean, they still, remind me to tell you about my most recent one, because it's pretty funny.
I will.
The thing with authors is when they stop writing a piece of themselves into the story, readers have a harder time connecting with it. So if you write, like I could write a story that is, whatever, pick a genre, I could probably write it. But if I didn't put a piece of myself into it, no reader is going to connect with it because it means nothing to them. Does that make sense? Like, you've got to have a resonance with your readers. And that's where I see most authors stumble. And the reason they don't do it is because then when they get a shitty review, it feels personal. It feels like you're being attacked because you've put a piece of yourself into that story and then you get a shitty review. And so therefore you must be a shitty person, which is not correlation. But that is the price we pay as authors. If we want to do well and find our brand and find out who we are as an author, you have to put some of yourself in those stories and in your characters and in the scenes. And, and it'll make it more enjoyable for the readers because it will feel real to them in whatever genre it is. It will feel real, but it will also be more enjoyable to you as an author because you'll have your little like inside giggle. Oh, I just cracked a joke that my grandpa cracked, 25 years ago, and it's still funny even now, or whatever little pieces of yourself that you put in there.
I love that so much because it's the same for marketing. So if you think of your books as marketing, like people respond to your vulnerability. Vulnerability brings out vulnerability. So, and we're in an age where people, can really see authenticity or not. Like, people are very savvy for authenticity, and they can see that in your books. Like, that's the books that are going to be, that have your heart in them. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm going to put it as a quote and like for everyone, I'm like, listen to this piece. This is the part that you should listen to because it's true. And it is scary to get a bad review. Like, here I am. I'm just starting this podcast and I'm like, I'm vulnerable. My baby is going to be out there. It feels like my child.
And you'll get trolls. I mean, that happens.
Yeah. I redefined it. And I encourage everybody to redefine trolls, which is now when I get bad reviews on things, I'm like, that means I'm a real author. That means I'm a real podcaster. I'm not a real one until I get my first bad review.
That's right. I always recommend people when they get bad reviews, they do one of two things. They pick out their favorite author, whoever that is, J.K. Rowling or, Jacqueline Carey or Robert Jordan, whoever they look up to, whoever kind of inspired them to become a writer. Go to their best-selling book, pull up the 1-star reviews and read them, because you'll realize, like, I love this author. This author is amazing. And these people are insane. How could they be saying these things? And realize that it's the same for you. There's going to be people who just adore you, and there's going to be people that aren't. And then you're going to get the trolls. I have one in my family, actually, I'm pretty sure is a troll. Pretty sure. This person would probably never listen to this podcast. I'd almost be tempted to name this person, but I'm being careful just on the off chance. But just miserable. And because that person's in my family and I see it and I see the behavior, I realize a lot of these things that happen to authors, whether it's a podcast or a book, and it is a troll, those trolls are absolutely miserable. They are so unhappy in their own lives. It is like their only joy is to lash out at people and bring other people down. It's just like that bully on the playground when you're a kid, right? And all you can do is just walk away and be like, wow, sucks to be you. Really, it sucks to be you because, I'm living the dream. I'm writing full time as a business, and many authors are, and they're doing it despite the 1-star reviews, right? So,
so tell us about that 1-star review.
Oh my God, it's so funny. I'd pull it up if I thought I could. It's on my newest book, Witch's Reign, which my reader base love it. Like, my reader base is just over the moon with this new series, which makes me really happy because I wanted it to be a longer series, and so you kind of play with those numbers when it comes to. But anyway, so I got I think it's the most recent review on it. And this fellow was basically saying it was too depressing for him. he said everything's bad and she's always sad, and which is not true. But anyways, it was amusing. And then he says, I'm going to coin a term. I'm going to make a new genre for this kind of book. It's called depression porn. And he hashtagged it, I think. And I'm just like, I just started laughing. I'm like, I'm part of depression porn. I don't even know what this is, but it's just making me laugh. Like, okay, great. And so I shared it with a few of my author friends, and these are authors who've, they've been around the block for a time or two, so they have a kind of a giggle about it. And then the one author said, I'm slightly jealous. He coined a term for you. She's
Yes.
like, that's the best 1-star review I've ever seen. I'm like, I know. I feel like I should send him a note and tell him thank you. Like, I love this review, he'd probably freak him right out for me to do that. But that's like the best way to deal with trolls, is be like, oh my God, that is the best review I've ever seen for 1 star, or thank you for that criticism. Like, it wigs them out. If you ever want to really wig out a troll, is you find a way to contact them and just say, thank you so much for your criticism of my book. I really think your points are valid, and I'm going to apply them to my next book. And they usually come back on it, because I've done this, like, oh my God. If they come back at all, they're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe you reached out to me. And well, good for you for, trying to improve your craft. Suddenly they're like your cheering squad, which is weird. It's such a turn, but it does happen. It does happen.
Yeah. You guys, just to like give you a different review, I recently, when I knew that I was going to be interviewing Shannon, went out and found her most recent book and read it in the couple of days before this and loved it. Thought that the second one was already out. Thank goodness by the time you guys hear this, it will already be out. So phew. But it's a longer series, so keep that in mind. There will still be more, and you'll still be like, but more. Okay. Right. So I want to wind back around to the author as a business, but because you said that you are writing. You're writing to your author brand and to your audience's expectations. Yes. And I want to ask you about writing to expectations versus the purity of your creativity and craft.
All right. Well, that really is almost two different balls of wax, because once you take on this career as a career in a business, you no longer get to indulge. I'm sorry. Like, you don't get to say, well, I feel like writing sci-fi today, and I feel like writing romance tomorrow, and I feel like writing a memoir the day after. If you want to continue as a business, then you have to go on like you've started. And I've seen it time and again where authors, talented, and I don't mean like they're not bad authors at all. They're talented writers with great ideas, and they jump around from this genre to that genre to this genre to that genre, and they've got 15 or 20 books out there, and they're like, I don't understand why I can't make a living at this. Their books that they get good reviews, very little. And I'm like, the problem is you're getting 20 readers over there with that genre and 20 readers over there with that genre. So my goal when I started this, like I said, was to create a business. And I had run a business before. And so I understood my previous business was client-based, meaning you keep your clients happy and they keep coming back as clients. They keep putting money in your pocket for your services. And with an author and books, it's really not a lot different. As long as I keep my readers happy, they will keep coming back and reading the next book and the next book and the next book. And that's my goal. My goal is to create readers who are addicted to my worlds and to my words. That's the absolute goal. And so I write to expectations, meaning I write to a certain style. Like I say, like I know what my readers love the best. I know what they love the best. So I take that core of that idea and then I wrap it up in something new. So each character, each strong female character is going to have different flaws and different strengths. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them do have a potty mouth. I would say it's probably split down the middle right now in terms of like bad language, but depending on how they're raised, one character, Riley, she was raised very high end, but her bloodlines are such that they leave her to a tendency to cuss. Like it's complicated, but anyways, and another is raised by an ex-Marine dad. So, she's she's come into this honestly. And so I think that you can still have a little bit of an indulgence. Like, I have a series coming up that'll be out late next year that I'm kind of playing with, and it's all dealing with Egyptian mythology. So totally different from other stuff I've done, but really fun. Another strong character. She's strong in a different way than Zamira, than Riley, than Larkspur. That's where I get to indulge. I get to go, I'm going to take this and I'm going to create it somewhere else, or in another vein of mythology, or another world that I've created. And that for me makes sense. And I guess that's what part of it is. I still have, it's a challenge to do that. And so it's fun because it's a challenge to bring those two things together. That's where I get to really stretch myself and be creative in a different way than if I just indulged my every whim, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make sense. And I kind of like to, I ask these questions kind of guidingly. I'm like, but because I want people to understand, yes, for a business, there's this certain, things that you have to meet the expectations. I have actually said that exact thing. Marketing is meeting people's expectations and doing it frequently enough that they keep coming back to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also that you also still get to have the creativity just so long as you've met those expectations, whatever your audience's expectations are.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
After you've met those expectations, besides that, you get to be as creative as you want.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is I suspect that if I were to branch into, say, science fiction, more of a sci-fi genre, as long as I kept my heroine pretty badass and pretty strong, I'd have a pretty good jump across. But what I've noticed is like I can't jump into paranormal romance so much. Like if I create a story that is more romance centric, I lose readers. And it's not that the books are any more poorly written or anything like that. It's just that they come with a certain set of expectations for my action, my plot, as well as the characters. And the thing is, every author will create that. And I've seen it in different genres, all of my friends around me, and when they break those expectations, your readers get pissy. Yeah. For good or for ill, whether you like it or not, that is the reality, is they expect certain things, and when you don't meet those expectations, they get cranky.
Well, you guys, think about it. The reason that McDonald's, I'm going to go to McDonald's here, but the reason McDonald's is such an amazing franchise and why they were so successful is because every McDonald's, you're going to get the same thing. It might not be the most amazing hamburger, but exactly what it's going to be like at any McDonald's around the world. You're like, I want a cheeseburger, and it will be exactly the same.
Except I will tell you this: they sell their French fries with mayo in France. I know this because it's terrible. I was like, what is this?
And I live in Idaho, where almost every fast food restaurant has what we call fry sauce. It's a combo of mayo and ketchup with a little bit of seasoning sometimes.
That's for the high-end places.
This is still, you go to, anyways, yes. But you know what you're going to get, and that's why they're so successful, because I'm in the mood for it. It might not be the best, but at least you're going to get a certain quality. And that's part of the business of the writing, is knowing you're going to get a certain, I would absolutely read your sci-fi books. I am your ideal audience. Shannon, I'm your ideal reader, and I would absolutely read your sci-fi because I'm like, it still has fun, badass women in it who are
a romantic element
with a romantic element and some kind of fantastical things, whether it's sci-fi or dragons.
Well, maybe I'll get brave. And I'll branch out in the next couple of years. But the problem is for me now is I have so many ideas within the urban fantasy worlds, and I've got so many, even my character cast from like the Riley Adamson series. I've got people asking me, I've got a branch off of that coming out in August, and it's the young witch Pamela. It's her series now coming, and I've got other people saying, oh, well, we want to hear about Cactus from the Elemental series, and we want his story, and which is great. It just means that I've got more books to write than I got time on my life,
That's a good problem to have. I like that problem. So let's talk a little bit about the writing. So what is your writing process? Like what's your writing process? Let's just start there.
Okay. So I try to, it doesn't always work out this way, but I try to write about a book a month. It doesn't always work out exactly that way because sometimes books don't work out quite the way you want them to. You have to go back and redo. But generally speaking, I write 10 to 12 books a year. And if I start on the first, then I am doing a couple days of plot. And then I usually send my plot to my editor and have her take a look at it before I start writing. And the reason I do that is she helps me to catch anything kind of big, anything major plot hole wise before I even start writing, which means less editing down the line. And then I aim for 3,000 to 5,000 words a day. My average is somewhere in there, but I would say like my big days, I might write 10 to 15,000 words, and then I might take a day or two off, let my brain kind of settle. And part of it too is because I'm running this as a business pretty much on my own. There's days that will require me. Like this morning, I spent an hour on the phone with an audiobook company, and then I spent half an hour on top of that uploading some audiobook files. And so there's things that you have to do admin wise that take away from the writing. But so I would say like my average is probably like 3,000 words a day consistently. And that gives me my rough draft by the end of the month. And then from there, it goes into edits. I have a developmental editor that does 2 passes with me. She's the same one who looks at the plot. And then I have a copy editor and a line editor. And then I have a number of, I guess you'd call them beta readers, but they're not really seeing the book in rough draft form. They're more like, there's mostly my ARC team. And they quite often will come back with like typos and stuff. They're great. They're like, it's almost like a game to them to see how many boo-boos they can find in my book. So that works. It works for me, works for them. They get stuff early and I get additional editing help. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So after you finish your rough draft in a month, you've sent it to the editor and it comes back. Have you then just started the next book immediately because you're doing 10 to 12? Okay.
Pretty much. Yeah. There's an overlap. So like right now, so just to give you an idea, right now I have one book that's about halfway through the rough draft form. I have one book that is in like major plot mode, meaning like we're fleshing it out and coming up with all these ideas. And I have one book that's finished and has had one round of edits, but I haven't got back to the edits yet because it's for later this year. And then the goal is that like by the time the middle of the month hits, I'll have both the rough draft of this one book and those edits on the other book done. And I can focus on my next one.
Okay. So it's not like 1 month, 30 days passes. And at the end, there's some of them that you're like, this is for next year. This is for later this year. This is for. So
I'm trying always to work ahead because I have a son who's 4 years old and I want to spend time with him and do fun things with him. I'm trying to bank books so that I'm working on Jin's Dominion right now, which is the 3rd in the Desert Curse series, and it comes out in April. So my hope is to have it done in the next few weeks so that I can go through the editing process. And then if there's any boo-boos, like issues that I have to fix, I've got time. And then ideally have these books banked so that I can do things like I say, spend time with my kid or go for a walk or have kind of a life. Because the thing with most authors who are writing full time, and because I know I'm not abnormal in this, is that there's a real lack of balance in terms of like work versus life. So the problem with that is then you start to get health issues. It puts strains on relationships. It causes things like anxiety and depression to crop up because you're just constantly going, but you're never balancing your work life with other things that are good for you, right? Poor eating habits, bad drinking habits. I mean, these are not all mine, just so you know. I'm just kind of like putting the list here. And so this year has been like really a turning point for me to try and find a way to balance my life better because I want to live a long time. I want to write books for a long time. So the only way to do that is to figure out how to make this work term, not just go hard for 5 years and then burn out.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And I have another question because this is what you're doing right now. But I have a question about how you were doing that when you were still working. But also I I thought earlier in the conversation when you said I went from doing a really physical job to just sitting and writing in my mind. And I was like, yes, that sounds amazing. But also it sounds like what I've done recently, which is like gain 20 pounds because I'm not moving as much as I used to move.
Yeah, and we're older now too. Or at least I am.
Like, I am. We're similar in age.
Oh my God. Like I am. So when I was still shoeing horses, I packed my laptop with me and I worked. Like if I had a half-hour break between horses, I'd pull over to the side of the road and I'd work. I'd write. Because at that point I was primarily just writing with not a lot of editing to start, or not editing, pardon me, publishing at that point. It was just building my repertoire. Yeah. So, but I had like this, I was on fire. Like I couldn't write enough. Once I figured out that I could do this and I could make a living at it potentially, and it's not that I didn't love my job, but I just knew that wasn't long-term. I couldn't do that long-term. So, I just took it with me everywhere. We went on vacation. I took my laptop. I went to work, at a distance and maybe stay overnight, and I'd take my laptop and that's all I did. I'd cut out all of the extraneous activities. Like I used to rollerblade and I used to do a lot of horseback riding, and we used to go on little mini vacations. And so really I cut out all those extra things, not because I didn't love them, but because I could see the potential for this to become a career, but I knew that I was going to have to work at it. And it's not everybody can or is willing to do that. And that's totally fine. You may still be able to do this as a career, but it might take you longer or you might never make it. I mean, that's the cold hard truth. If you're constantly saying it's taken me 15 years to write a book, you might be writing the next, To Kill a Mockingbird, but you also might not be, like,
and with the way the way the market is, you might, but are you going to get in front of the right person? Right. I don't know. We don't know. Who knows how many To Kill a Mockingbirds were written, or of equal quality were written and never made it in front of the right person. And so it's just got thrown away into a dump somewhere. I think about that all the time, and I'm like, thank God for self-publishing.
Right. And I think too, that's why I like doing the boot camps every once in a while, because it lets me, first of all, I get to yell at a bunch of authors and they love it. So that's kind of fun. But basically I just see so many mistakes that I made, and I try to say these are the things that you can avoid, just listen to me. I've done this once or twice. So yeah.
What are these boot camps?
I've done a couple of boot camps. They're not something I really advertise because they're a lot of work on my part, mostly with my local writers group. I've done one with them, and I've done a couple of Michelle Fox from the Wolf Pack, which is a group of authors that have banded together. Actually has put on 2 conferences now in January. She puts them on. They're online conferences, so anyone can attend. And in both cases, I basically my videos when I do her boot camp or her conferences are like the come to Jesus videos. Like I'm not going to pull any punches. It's time to listen up, ladies and gents. Like, pull your head out of your ass. Let's get writing. Let's get her done. And it's fun because I think a lot of times in the author world, it's important to be nice. It's very important to be nice, but I think sometimes being nice doesn't help because people are so nice that nobody's telling the truth. Like that cover looks like shit and it's not going to sell anything, but everybody says, oh, it's so pretty. I love those rainbow of colors in it or whatever it is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help anyone to be overly nice to them. Like the truth is tough. And, I've really encouraged my editor. I'm always like, you know what? You be as mean as you like. And she's like, oh, I can't be mean. I said, well, maybe rephrase that. You need to be honest. If it doesn't work, you need to tell me because you do me no favors by telling me it's great and letting me publish something that isn't my best work.
Well, and spend all the time.
Absolutely. But it's hard because this is the downside of the indie world. So in the traditional world, I'm totally off on a tangent now here. So here you go. This is the lucky side of you. You get this.
Yeah.
Traditional world, an editor or a cover artist does not work off for the publishing house.
Mm.
Doesn't matter what the author wants. Doesn't matter. The author could hate the editor. What an asshole! He told me to change a third of my And guess who he's going to get for an editor for the next one? The same fucking editor. And the editor doesn't care because they're getting paid by the publishing house. So they are going to be brutally honest because their job is to make a book that's going to sell. So in their mind, they are doing what's best for the publishing house by being brutal to the author. Okay. Now in the indie world, an indie editor is dependent on the independent author coming back to them time and time again. So are they going to be brutally honest with them? Not really. Not unless you're ballsy and you say, listen, you need to be brutal with me. You need to just lay this out because you do me no favors.
Yeah.
And so that is a common problem. I hear this all the time. Authors say things, my editor Janie and I, we are best friends. She is so amazing and she loves my work and my character. She just tells me my characters are the best she ever is. And I'm like, that's bullshit. I have read that book. The characters suck.
So
you can't, they don't want. So that's the thing is you have to be brave enough as an author to say, I'm going to take the bad so that I can become a better author. I have had like some of the most horrendous, my absolute worst editing story, my absolute worst is horrific. So like, like when you get an edit, you get some read, obviously you get read and you get some comments. And I might like in an average manuscript, the first pass, I might get 100 comments, this doesn't work or the plot, whatever. Like, I'm just going to go average. Maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little more. My absolute worst book, and I actually I don't think I ever picked up. It scared me so bad. It was an attempt at romance. I had over 700 comments in a 60,000 word rough draft. And I just put it down and somebody said, "Is it going to release this book?" And I don't even know where to start. It was unreal. So there's a balance, obviously. Like if that editor had given me like half that many comments, I would have tackled it and then come back, right? But so that's the learning part on the editor's side. But you don't learn if they're nice to you. That sounds terrible, but like my editor I have now, she's amazing. We're not friends. I like her, but we don't like hang out online. We don't chit chat. Every once in a while, she's like, "How old's that kid of yours?" I'm like, "He's 4." Like. And I'm sure we would probably be good friends, but I'm almost leery to do that, right? Because I don't want her to suddenly be like, "Oh, I don't want to ruin friendship."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So the like behind that, you guys, the behind that is what is your intention or what is your aim or goal or what is it that you want to create, right? So do you want your ego to feel good? Or do you want to have a successful author business?
And that's exactly it. Absolutely. Do you want to have your feathers that are ruffled because someone said you got a couple bad reviews and your editor comes and says, "Oh, that's my favorite book of yours," which that's a line I've heard. And I always want to say that doesn't mean that they like it. They just said it's the best of yours. Like that's not their best of their roster. Like, I think a lot of authors, and I put myself in this, but I've got a pretty thick skin now. A lot of authors are sensitive creatures, and I still have my moments, and it can be really hard. And sometimes we need that assurance. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have that, but I'm saying you shouldn't have it from your editor, right? Like you can have your author buddies. Should be the ones to say, "Hey, you know what? You're amazing and you're great and you're going to do fantastic. And you know what? Your editor might be tough on you, but you can do this," right? That's your cheering section or your really hardcore readers. But your editor really shouldn't be that person, because if you want to improve as an author, that's where you're going to do it.
Oh my gosh. That is so good. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
Because I think that's a really, really good advice for people. So, can you tell us a couple more things before we close up? You tell us about an obstacle or challenge that you faced, and then what advice would you give?
Specifically to the writing, an obstacle or challenge?
It could be whichever. Yeah.
Probably the toughest thing I've faced was having to fire someone that had worked for me for a long time. And I say this because authors, they work with different, cover artists and this sort of thing. This person had worked with me for a number of years, and it was a learning curve for me to realize that even as long as I've been in this industry, and I'm thinking maybe I sound fairly confident, but the reality is, I still have my moments. And this person kind of, let's just say, took advantage of that in terms of how they, how I was perceiving myself, right? That I couldn't possibly do this business on my own, and I couldn't make it without them, and I'd fail without them. And I believed that person for some time, and then I fired them. And I laugh because it was brutally hard, but I realized in the last, since it happened, wow, I can much do this on my own. And it was still, I still have some pretty good confidence in me, and recognizing that some people just are going to try and take advantage of your sensitivities as an author, or your creativities as an author. And so I would say that would be something to just watch out for, is that not everybody who's out there who seems to be your friend is your friend. Which sounds really, really jaded, but I don't know how else to say it, because I wish someone had warned me that it was even a boss, because in my life I just hadn't dealt with people like that, right? I just hadn't. So
yeah, I think a good way to keep an eye on that is if they do think you can do it yourself, but they want to help.
Right.
They're like, you can totally do this. I'll just help you out with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, that was probably my hardest obstacle, because even when I've made mistakes, and I've made lots of mistakes in this business, learning the ropes, I never felt like they were obstacles. I always just felt like it was like a training ground. Like it's just been a proving ground, a training ground, where every time I make a mistake, I think, okay, what did I learn from that? Why did that work? Why didn't it work? The obstacles I've dealt with have been primarily people. Maybe that's the introvert in me talking. It's probably the introvert in me talking, but anyways.
Okay. And what advice would you give to other people who want to be successful indie authors?
Okay. So we talked a little bit about it. One is definitely putting your heart into the industry 110%, letting your story kind of flow from your truths, whatever that is, whatever your truths are. But I would say the other thing is that you have to work at it. You can't expect to write 2 days a week, and get books done in a timely manner. Because if you're going to be an indie author, you're going to need to publish at least 4 books a year. I mean, it might sound crazy to a lot of people, especially if you're aiming for a traditional market. But in the indie world, if you don't publish that often, you will get forgotten. Like there's just so many good authors out there now that you really have to keep producing high quality, fun, memorable books. Am I ever going to win a literary award for the new classic? No, but people remember my books as being the one they took with them on vacation, and they just escaped, flying on the backs of dragons while they were in Maui, and that's what I go for. And so I think my best piece of advice is just to keep at it, to write every day, even if it's a small amount. And when it comes to the learning, don't be afraid to make a mistake. A mistake is something you learn from, and that will make you better at it. And please stop. Please. I'm going to beg. Please stop emailing authors you consider successful and asking them for all their secrets. We all learned it the hard way. And there is this phenomenal website that I'm going to spell it. I'm going to spell it out for everyone. Yeah. I highly recommend it. It is a website that basically will solve all of your problems when it comes to searching things. It is www.google.com, and you need to put the work in. Don't expect others to do for you, because you never learn the way to learn it. You research it and suss it out and figure out how to do this. That's why the authors you see that are successful is because they busted their asses, not just at the writing, but at the understanding the industry, following agents, reading blogs about it, figuring out how to do your formatting. I mean, it's horrible to say, I could still format a book for Mobi out of a Word document, which is not real pretty, but it's how you did it back then, right? Vellum is a lovely, lovely creation. I love the people who created Vellum. I don't think they charge for it, to be honest, but don't tell them I said that. But, like all these things that these authors did, they did, they're successful in part because they pulled up their boots and they got after it. They didn't just keep messaging other people to try and figure it out for them.
Yeah. Like you can listen to podcasts like this podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a great friend. Her name is Tamara Mercer. She's actually an author in training, and this is what she does. She listens to podcasts when she's working outside. She works outside, and so she listens to podcasts, and she has learned a ton. She listens to all these different podcasts. I'm going to recommend she listen to this because, of course, now I've named her, so she's going to be excited. I hope she's going to be excited. But she's learned a lot, and so she's, her and I still talk, but I don't have to lead her every step of the way because she's getting it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's great. We can have intelligent conversations because I'm not trying to teach her the basics. I don't have to because she's a business-minded person, and so she's learning. So do that. Everybody, go out there, get Google on your side. You can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Use the resources that are there that already exist. There's a ton of them. There are a ton of them.
Absolutely. Google likes to ask them questions.
And most authors have a FAQ section now that they're like, here. And I know you have one as well. I noticed that. But I was like, I'm still going to ask her to be on my podcast.
No, it's great. It's great. I have an FAQ section both for readers and for authors. So you can go to either and check it out.
Where can we go check that out, Shannon?
So my website is www.shannonmayer.com. And it's regularly updated. Sometimes I leave really funny blogs there about my life and animals vomiting in the middle of the night or kids peeing on my face. These things happen to me on a regular basis. My readers think I'm making this shit up, and I'm not. This is my life. This is how I live on a farm with a lot of weird things. But so you can go there. You can check out my blog. You can check out my books. You can sign up for my newsletter if you like. I send it out like once a month, generally speaking. Sometimes twice a month if I'm feeling frisky, but it's extra work. So I tend to just keep it to once a month. And then also on Facebook. I am pretty active on Facebook. I have a really solid readers group there called Mayer's Magnificent Readers. And I do lots of giveaways there and lots of just hanging out with my readers there, spending time with them and answering questions. And sometimes I'll do live videos just for them. And it's a great little community. Everybody's very well behaved. There's no bad behavior in there. I kick people out when they get bad behavior.
But that doesn't mean that they don't curse. It just means that it's bad behavior. Because obviously, there's no. Shannon likes a sassy woman.
I do. I am a sassy woman, and I love to write a sassy character. I mean, bad behavior. There's no stuff. There's no bashing of racial stuff, girls versus guys. There's nothing. It's just about books and reading and fantasy, and so
thank you. So you guys
thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I also wanted to just quickly end with, you had this quote on your website and I loved it so much. So it was, leap before you look and let your dreams carry you on their wings, which I just loved that so much. Is that yours or is that yours?
That's me.
I loved it so much. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being here. You guys make sure to, all of the information that she gave for where to reach her will be in the show notes for this episode at authorlikeaboss.com. And thank you, Shannon, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Hugs and happy authoring here from Ella at Author Like a Boss podcast.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.